They say you never truly know a person until money is involved. In my case, it took 70 years, a death, and an inheritance to discover the true nature of those I loved most. My name is Helen Whitaker, and 6 months ago, I was expelled from my son's home like unwanted furniture. Today, I stand on the shores of Lake George as the wind whips my silver hair, watching the autumn leaves dance across the water's surface. Behind me stands a cabin that changed everything, not because of what it was, but because of what lay beneath it. It began on a crisp October morning. I had just returned from a 3-day trip to Vermont, visiting my sister Martha. The taxi dropped me at Christopher and Olivia's sprawling Westchester County estate, a colonial revival masterpiece with manicured gardens and a circular driveway. This had been my home for the past 2 years, ever since my husband Robert passed away. The house felt unusually quiet as I wheeled my small suitcase through the grand foyer. Normally, my son would be working in his study, soft classical music drifting through the hallways. But today, a heavy silence pressed against the walls. I found them in the formal living room. Christopher, perched on the edge of the velvet sofa, his eyes downcast, and Olivia standing by the fireplace, arms crossed over her expanding belly. 7 months pregnant with my first grandchild, her face held none of the maternal softness one might expect. Instead, her features were arranged in cool calculation. "Mother," Christopher stood awkwardly, "we didn't expect you back so early." On the coffee table, between us lay a manila envelope, its contents partially visible, legal papers with my late husband's law firm letterhead. "The inheritance has been finalized," Olivia announced without preamble, her voice clipped and efficient. "Christopher received the Miami penthouse. It appraised at $4.2 million. I nodded slowly, setting my purse down. "That's wonderful. Your father always wanted you to have that property." A strange look passed between them, something unspoken that made my stomach tighten. "And you," Olivia continued, her perfectly manicured finger tapping against a document, "have been left the cabin at Lake George." The cabin. A small 2-bedroom structure on a wooded lot that Robert's family had owned for generations. We had spent summers there when Christopher was young. Before. Ambition and status became his guiding stars. "Well, that seems fair," I said softly. "I have wonderful memories there." Olivia's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Fair? That decrepit shack versus a multi-million-dollar Miami property? The cabin isn't even worth listing." Christopher cleared his throat. "Mother, there's something else we need to discuss." The way he avoided my eyes told me everything I needed to know. "With the baby coming," he continued, "we're converting your room into a nursery." "I see." My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. "When would you like me to move out?" Olivia stepped forward. "Today would be best. We've already packed most of your things." The words hit me like a physical blow. I glanced toward the staircase, noticing for the first time the stack of suitcases and boxes in the hallway. "Today?" I repeated, my hand instinctively reaching for the pearl necklace Robert had given me on our 40th anniversary. "But I haven't arranged anywhere to go." "The cabin is yours now," Olivia said, her tone suggesting she was being extraordinarily generous. "We've arranged a car service to take you there. All expenses paid. Christopher, at least, had the decency to look ashamed. "Mother, I'm sorry for the rush, but Olivia's doctor recommended we start preparing for the baby immediately. Her blood pressure—" "Christopher," I interrupted gently, "you don't need to explain." But what I wanted to say was, you don't need to lie. Within the hour, I was watching movers load my life into the back of a SUV. 50 years of marriage, 70 years of living, reduced to 4 suitcases and 6 boxes. Photographs of Robert and me in Venice. The quilt my grandmother had made. Books with corners folded by hands now stilled by death. As the driver closed the trunk, Olivia appeared in the doorway. Her perfect blonde hair caught the sunlight. Her designer maternity dress probably cost more than everything I was taking with me. "It's for the best." "Helen," she said, not bothering to step outside, "a woman your age shouldn't be underfoot in a home with a newborn. You'll be much happier somewhere. Simpler." Christopher emerged behind her, looking uncomfortable but resolute. He approached me with an envelope. "Here's a check to help you get settled." I didn't take it. I don't need charity from my own son. "Mother, what I needed was time," I said quietly. "Respect. Consideration. But it seems those aren't part of my inheritance." The driver opened my door, and I slid into the leather seat, my arthritis protesting the movement. Through the window, I watched my son and his wife retreat into their perfect home, closing the door before the car had even pulled away. The journey to Lake George took nearly 3 hours. As we drove north, skyscrapers gave way to suburbs, then to rolling countryside, and finally to the dense woods surrounding the lake. Autumn had painted the landscape in fierce oranges and reds, a burning backdrop for the ice forming in my heart. Night was falling as we arrived, the lake a black mirror reflecting a scatter of early stars. The driver unloaded my belongings onto the porch of a dark cabin that seemed to hunch against the coming winter. "Do you want me to wait until you're settled, ma'am?" he asked, concerned. I shook my head. "I'll be fine. Thank you." But as his taillights disappeared down the winding road, leaving me alone in the gathering darkness, "fine" felt like the hollowest of words. I fumbled with the key, my hands trembling from more than just the cold. Behind me, the night air bit through my wool coat. Ahead, the dark cabin loomed like a forgotten memory. In the silence, I heard Olivia's final words as I'd climbed into the car. "Rot there, you stinking old woman. That shack fits you perfectly." She hadn't realized I could still hear her through the partially open window. Or perhaps she had. The key finally slid into the lock, the mechanism giving way with a reluctant groan. I pushed the door open, bracing myself for dust, decay, and the musty scent of abandonment. Instead, warm golden light spilled out, embracing me like an old friend. The cabin was immaculate. The hardwood floors gleamed under soft lamplight. The stone fireplace had been laid with fresh logs, waiting only for a match. The furniture, our old comfortable pieces that Robert had insisted on keeping, here had been cleaned and arranged invitingly. I stepped inside, disbelief warring with confusion. On the rustic pine mantelpiece, a photograph caught my eye, one I had never seen before. It showed Robert as a young man, perhaps 30, standing beside an elderly woman with kind eyes and Robert's same distinctive smile. Pinned to the frame was a folded envelope with my name written in my husband's familiar slanted handwriting. With fingers that wouldn't quite steady, I opened it and removed a single sheet of paper. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the time has come for you to learn the truth about our little cabin by the lake." Before I could read further, my phone rang, startling me. The screen displayed a name I hadn't seen in months. Linda Avery, Robert's longtime attorney. "Helen?" Her voice was urgent. "Thank God you answered. I've been trying to reach you at Christopher's, but they said you'd moved." "Just today," I replied, my eyes still fixed on Robert's letter. "Listen carefully," Linda said. "I need you to come to Albany tomorrow morning. There's something you must see, something that will change everything." Sleep eluded me that night. I lay on the familiar bed in the master bedroom, Robert's letter clutched in my hands, reading and rereading his words until they blurred before my eyes. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the time has come for you to learn the truth about our little cabin by the lake. The woman in the photograph is Rose Meredith, my grandmother, a woman of remarkable strength and foresight. What Christopher and the others don't know, what no one knows except Linda Avery and myself, is that this property is far more than a simple vacation home. In 1963, geological surveys conducted for the state discovered something valuable beneath these woods, but Rose refused to sell. Instead, she made me promise that this land would always remain in our family, passed down to someone who would understand its true value. I've chosen you, my love, because you alone see beyond the surface of things. You always have. Tomorrow, go to the boathouse. Behind the third canoe rack, there's a loose floorboard. What you find there will explain everything. Remember that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity. All my love, forever, Robert. The letter raised more questions than it answered. What could possibly be under the cabin that would make this worthless property valuable? Why had Robert kept this secret even from me? And why choose me over Christopher to inherit this mystery? Dawn found me sitting on the dock, watching pink light spill across the lake's surface. In the early morning quiet, the world seemed simpler, cleaner. I took a deep breath of pine-scented air and made my decision. The boathouse could wait. First, I needed to meet with Linda. I dressed carefully in one of the few good outfits Olivia had deigned to pack for me, a charcoal pantsuit and pearl earrings. The drive to Albany took just over an hour, the morning traffic thinning as I left the small towns around Lake George behind. Linda's law office occupied the top floor of a dignified brick building in downtown Albany. I'd been here many times with Robert, but never alone. As the elevator climbed, so did my anxiety. Linda met me at the door, her sharp features softened by genuine concern. At 63, she was a formidable presence. Silver-streaked black hair cut in a precise bob, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and a reputation as one of the fiercest attorneys in upstate New South York. Helen, she clasped my hands in hers. You look exhausted. Come in. She led me to her private office, a space dominated by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive oak desk. The windows offered a panoramic view of the Hudson River, gray under the October sky. Coffee? She offered, already pouring. Please. I accepted the steaming cup. Linda, what's going on? Robert's letter, the cabin, I don't understand any of it. Linda settled behind her desk, folding her hands. First, tell me exactly what happened with Christopher and Olivia. I recounted yesterday's events, trying to keep emotion from my voice. When I mentioned being given just hours to leave, Linda's expression hardened. Those entitled little... She caught herself. Sorry, but that's not how we structured things. You were supposed to have at least 30 days to transition. Structured things? I echoed. Linda opened a drawer and removed a thick file. Helen, Robert came to me 18 months before his death. He already suspected his cancer had returned, though he hadn't told you yet. He wanted to put certain protections in place. She spread several documents on the desk. The Miami penthouse going to Christopher was always part of the plan. But there were conditions attached. Conditions that Christopher and Olivia have clearly violated. My confusion must have shown on my face because Linda softened her tone. Robert knew his son well, Helen. He loved Christopher, but he wasn't blind to his weaknesses or to Olivia's influence. She pushed a document toward me. This is the actual inheritance. Structure. The penthouse transferred to Christopher yesterday, yes, but with a legally binding covenant that you would be welcome in their home for as long as you wished to stay. I stared at the paper, the legal language swimming before my eyes. They never mentioned this. Of course they didn't. Linda's voice was tight with anger. Because the moment they violated that covenant, which they did, by forcing you out, the ownership of the penthouse becomes conditional. They must now pay you a monthly stipend of $12,000 for the remainder of your life. The room seemed to tilt slightly. $12,000? Monthly? Linda nodded. Robert wanted to ensure you'd be cared for one way or another. If Christopher chose to honor his father's wishes and treat you with respect, he'd have the property free and clear. If not, she let the implication hang in the air. Does Christopher know this? I asked quietly. He will by the end of today. I've already prepared the notification. I set my coffee down, my hand trembling slightly. I don't want his money, Linda, especially not if it's forced. It's not about the money, Helen. It's about consequences. Linda leaned forward. But that's actually not why I asked you here today. There's something much more important we need to discuss regarding the cabin. She stood and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. From it, she removed a slim leather portfolio. Before I show you this, I need you to understand something. Robert wanted to tell you himself, but the cancer progressed faster than anyone expected. He made me promise to wait until the inheritance was settled before revealing this. She placed the portfolio before me and opened it carefully. Inside was a series of maps, surveys, and what appeared to be scientific reports. In 1977, a geological survey discovered significant lithium deposits on the Lake George property, Linda explained. At today's prices, the mineral rights alone are worth approximately $70 million. The room went silent except for the sudden roaring in my ears. 70 million? I managed. Linda nodded. Robert rejected numerous offers over the years. He believed that land was meant to stay in the family, specifically with someone who would be a responsible steward. That's why he left it to you, not Christopher. I thought of Olivia's sneer. That? Decrepit shack versus a multi-million-dollar Miami property? Does anyone else know about this? I asked. Only Howard Green, your nearest neighbor at the lake. He's been keeping an eye on the property for decades at Robert's request. He's the one who prepared the cabin for your arrival. A knock interrupted us, and Linda's assistant poked her head in. Ms. Avery, Mr. Whitaker is on line 1. He says it's urgent. Linda and I exchanged glances. Well, she said with a grim smile, that was faster than I expected. Would you like to take the call, or shall I? I straightened my shoulders, feeling something shift inside me, a quiet strength I hadn't accessed in years. Neither, I said firmly. Let him leave a message. We have more important matters to discuss. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt the faintest glimmer of something like power. Not the vengeful kind that Olivia might crave, but something steadier and more dignified. As Linda outlined the details of my unexpected wealth, I found myself thinking not of what I could buy, but of what I could build. Robert left one more thing for you, Linda said, reaching into her desk drawer. She placed a small velvet box in my palm. This belonged to Rose Meredith. Inside lay an emerald ring, the deep green stone catching the light like a cat's eye. She was quite a woman by all accounts, Linda continued. Started the first women's shelter in Albany back in 1952. Robert thought you might want to continue her legacy in your own way. As I slipped the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The cabin felt different when I returned that evening. No longer a prison of exile, but a sanctuary harboring secrets. I stood on the porch for a long moment, watching twilight settle over the lake before heading directly to the boathouse. The structure sat at the water's edge, weathered gray siding blending with the gathering darkness. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of old wood and lake water. 3 canoe racks lined the far wall, just as Robert had described. I moved to the 3rd rack, my flashlight beam dancing across the wooden floor, until it caught the edge of a board that didn't quite match the others. Kneeling down, my joints protesting the movement, I worked my fingers along the seam and gently pried upward. The board came loose, revealing a metal wire lockbox nestled in the dark space below. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. The key to the box hung on a thin chain around my neck, Robert's personal key that he'd always worn. I'd kept it close since his death, never knowing its purpose until now. The lock turned with a decisive click. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, several folders of documents, and a small wooden box inlaid with Mother of Pearl. I opened the journal first, recognizing Robert's handwriting immediately. November 15th, 1977. The geologists confirmed today what we suspected. The entire northeastern portion of the property contains high-grade lithium deposits, some of the richest they've seen in the eastern United States. Matthews from American Mineral offered $1.2 million outright for the land. When I declined, he raised to $2.8 million before I even reached the door. Rose's words keep coming back to me. Land is the only thing they aren't making more of. She was right to hold on to this place, just as I'll hold on to it now. Some things are worth more than immediate gain. I flipped through the journal, decades of entries documenting offers, surveys, and Robert's steadfast refusal to sell. The most recent entry was dated just weeks before his death, March 3rd, 2023. Helen still doesn't know. Perhaps that's selfish of me, but I wanted to protect her from Christopher and Olivia's inevitable reaction. They see only dollar signs where I see legacy. I've made the arrangements with Linda. Everything goes to Helen. She'll know what to do with it. She always has. The emerald ring is ready. Rose would approve. I closed the journal, tears blurring my vision. Even in death, Robert had tried to shield me. I wiped my eyes and opened the wooden box. Inside lay a collection of photographs. Robert as a child, sitting on the dock with an elderly woman I now recognized as Rose, the cabin in its earlier days, and one that caught my breath. Our family when Christopher was about 10, all of us laughing as we roasted marshmallows by the lake. My phone buzzed, breaking the moment. Christopher's name flashed on the screen. The 7th call since my meeting with Linda. This time I answered. Mother. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Yes, I believe we do. I kept my tone neutral. Linda Avery delivered some paperwork today. The strain in his voice was palpable. There must be some mistake. Dad would never have set up such ridiculous conditions. I ran my finger over Rose's photograph. What seems ridiculous about honoring your father's wishes for my care? Of course we want to care for you. But this financial arrangement, it's extreme. $12,000 monthly? That's punitive. Is it? You live in a $4 million penthouse, Christopher. How much is your mother's dignity worth? The line went silent for a moment. This isn't like you, Mother. You've never been concerned with money, and I'm still not, I replied calmly. This isn't about money. It's about respect. Olivia is extremely upset, he countered, as if that should matter to me. I imagine she is. How inconvenient that actions have consequences. Another pause. When he spoke again, his tone had softened slightly. Look, why don't you come back to Westchester? We'll sort this out as a family. Your room, we haven't actually started renovations yet. The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Almost. My home is here now, I said firmly. If you'd like to visit, you're welcome anytime, but I won't be returning to live under Olivia's roof. At the cabin? Disbelief colored his words. Mother, be reasonable. That place isn't suitable for a woman your age, especially with winter coming. It's isolated, run down. Actually, I interrupted, I find it quite comfortable. Howard Green, our neighbor, has been most helpful in getting me settled. Howard Green? Christopher's voice sharpened. The old man who lives on the adjacent property? Mother, he's a stranger. You can't trust. He was your father's friend for 30 years, Christopher, which makes him considerably less of a stranger than your wife. The words hung between us, harsh but true. In the silence that followed, I heard a door slam on his end, followed by Olivia's voice in the background, demanding to know what I was saying. I need to go, Christopher said hurriedly. But this conversation isn't over. And Mother, don't make any decisions about the cabin. Olivia thinks we should have it appraised, just to be sure you're getting your fair share of the inheritance. I thought of the $70 million in lithium beneath my feet and smiled. That's thoughtful of her. Please tell Olivia I'm getting exactly what your father intended. After hanging up, I gathered the documents and returned to the main cabin. A soft knock at the door startled me. When I opened it, I found an older gentleman standing on my porch, a covered dish in his hands, and a border collie sitting dutifully at his side. Ms. Whitaker? Howard Green. His weathered face crinkled into a kind smile. Hope I'm not intruding. Thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal your first night back. Howard was tall and lean, with silver hair and the easy posture of someone comfortable in his own skin. The dog wagged her tail expectantly. That's very kind, I said, stepping back to let them in. And who's this? This is Scout. Best companion a widower could ask for. The dog trotted in, immediately making herself at home by the fireplace. Over Howard's homemade beef stew, I learned he'd been Robert's fishing buddy for decades. He'd retired from teaching environmental science at SUNY, and now spent his days writing a book on the changing ecosystem of the Adirondacks. Robert asked me to keep an eye on you when the time came, Howard admitted, refilling my water glass. Not that you need looking after, but he wanted to make sure you weren't alone up here. Did he tell you about the lithium? Howard nodded. I helped him commission the private surveys in 2015 when the offer started getting aggressive. That Chinese company, what were they called? Huaxin Resources? I supplied, referencing one of the documents I'd found. That's it. Offered $11 million cash. Robert didn't even blink. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the fire crackling in the hearth, Scout snoring softly. At our feet. What would you do? I asked finally. If it were your land? Howard considered the question, his eyes thoughtful. I wouldn't sell to the highest bidder, that's for sure. Too many of these companies strip the land and leave environmental disasters behind. He leaned forward. But there are responsible ways to utilize the resource. Partnerships with companies committed to sustainable practices, leasing arrangements that maintain your control of the land. Robert wanted me to continue Rose's legacy, I mused. She started a women's shelter. Howard's face brightened. The Rose Meredith Foundation. It still exists, though it's struggling these days. Funding cuts hit them hard during the pandemic. An idea began forming in my mind. Nebulous at first, then gaining clarity with each passing moment. By the time Howard and Scout left, promising to return for coffee the next day, I knew exactly what my next steps would be. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Rose's emerald ring on my finger, and Robert's journal beside my bed. The wind off the lake whispered through the pines surrounding the cabin, a sound that had once represented lonely isolation but now felt like the breath of possibility. A foundation? Linda looked up from the notes she'd been taking, her expression intrigued. 3 days had passed since my discovery in the boathouse, and we were once again sitting in her Albany office, this time with Howard beside me. The Rose Meredith Foundation for Women in Transition, I confirmed, using the lithium rights to fund it. Howard's put me in touch with Elaine Carter, the current director. They're doing incredible work, but operating on a shoestring budget. Linda tapped her pen against her legal pad. We could structure it as a charitable trust. The mineral rights remain your property, but a significant percentage of the leasing income goes directly to the foundation, which solves another problem, Howard added. Helen maintains control of the land while creating a lasting legacy that honors both Rose and Robert. Over the next hour, we sketched out the framework. Instead of selling the land outright, I would lease the mineral rights to a Canadian company Howard had vetted, one with an impeccable environmental record and commitment to sustainable extraction. Initial estimates suggest an annual income of approximately $4 to $5 million, Linda said, reviewing the projections. Even directing 60% to the foundation, you'd have substantial personal income. More than I could ever spend, I said honestly. And the cabin? Howard asked. Will you stay? I nodded, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. I think Robert knew I would find peace here. Besides, I added with a small smile, I've grown fond of my neighbors. Howard's eyes crinkled at the corners, and I felt a pleasant warmth spread through my chest, one that had nothing to do with mineral rights or inheritance. Linda was gathering the paperwork when her assistant knocked and entered without waiting for a response. Ms. Avery, Christopher, and Olivia Whitaker are in the lobby. They're demanding to see you and Mrs. Whitaker immediately. I exchanged glances with Linda, whose expression had hardened. Did they have an appointment? She asked, though we all knew the answer. No, but Mrs. Whitaker, the younger one, is quite insistent. Show them to conference room B, Linda instructed. Tell them we'll be with them shortly. When the assistant left, Linda turned to me. You don't have to see them, Helen. I straightened my jacket, touching Rose's emerald ring for courage. Yes, I do. It's time. Howard squeezed my hand. Would you like me to come with you? The offer touched me deeply. Thank you, but I need to handle this myself. Linda led me to a sleek conference room where Christopher and Olivia sat waiting. My son stood immediately upon seeing me, his expression a mixture of concern and calculation. Olivia remained seated, one hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Mother, Christopher began, we've been worried sick. You haven't been answering our calls. I've been busy, I replied, taking a seat across from them. Linda positioned herself at the head of the table, a subtle reminder of whose territory we were on. Olivia leaned forward. Busy doing what? Exactly? Conspiring with lawyers to extort money from your own son? Olivia, Christopher cautioned, but she waved him off. No, I'm tired of tiptoeing around this. Your father's will is completely unreasonable, Helen. $12,000 monthly? For what? Because we asked you to move to a property you already own? You didn't ask. I corrected her quietly. You packed my belongings and gave me hours to leave a home I'd been promised I could stay in for as long as I wished. We needed the space. You have 7 bedrooms, I interrupted, surprising myself with my directness. You needed to assert control. Christopher shifted uncomfortably. Mother, we didn't come here to argue. We came with a proposal. He slid a folder across the table. We're prepared to offer you a lump sum of $1 million in exchange for waiving the monthly payments and transferring ownership of the cabin to us. I didn't even glance at the folder. Why would you want the cabin? I thought it was just a worthless shack. Property values around Lake George are rising, Christopher explained smoothly. And with some renovations, it could make an excellent vacation home for us. Or we could tear it down and build something actually livable, Olivia added. Either way, it makes sense to keep all the family properties under one management. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The boy who had once spent summers catching fireflies in mason jars by the lake was gone, replaced by a man who viewed relationships as transactions and family as assets to be managed. I'm declining your offer, I said simply. Olivia's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. You can't be serious. $1 million is incredibly generous. It's approximately 7% of what you'd owe me over my expected lifetime, I replied, Linda's calculations fresh in my mind. So no, I don't find it particularly generous. Christopher leaned forward, his expression hardening. Mother, be reasonable. The cabin is worth— I know exactly what the cabin is worth, Christopher. I met his gaze steadily. Do you? Something in my tone gave him pause. He glanced at Linda, then back at me. What aren't you telling us? He asked slowly. I considered my options carefully. Part of me wanted to reveal everything, to see the shock on their faces when they learned the truth about the lithium deposits. But what would that accomplish beyond momentary satisfaction? I'm telling you that the cabin is my home now, I said finally, and that it's not for sale, not at any price. Olivia made a sound of disgust. This is ridiculous. We're trying to help you. No, I replied, rising from my chair. You're trying to help yourselves. There's a difference. Christopher stood as well, his expression tight with frustration. Is this how it's going to be? You're choosing a rundown cabin over your family? The question struck me as so fundamentally backward that I almost laughed. I'm not the one who made that choice, Christopher. You did, the moment you let your pregnant wife throw your mother out of your home. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. By the way, I've decided to honor your father's wishes in another way. The monthly payments will continue as stipulated in the will, but I won't be keeping the money. What does that mean? Olivia demanded. It means I'm donating every cent to the Rose Meredith Foundation for Women in Transition. I allowed myself a small smile. Women who have been discarded by the people who should have protected them. I left them. Sitting there, Olivia's face flushed with anger, Christopher's pale with uncertainty. As the door closed behind me, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, not because I'd won some victory, but because I'd finally spoken my truth without fear or apology. Howard was waiting in the hallway, Scout sitting patiently at his side. How did it go? He asked. Exactly as expected, I replied, and exactly as needed. As we walked out of the building together, the autumn sun warm on our faces, I realized something profound. In trying to discard me, Christopher and Olivia had inadvertently set me free. The weeks that followed my confrontation with Christopher and Olivia brought a strange peace. November settled over Lake George with an artist's touch, frost gilding the trees each morning, the water darkening to a deep slate blue. Howard and I fell into a comfortable routine. Morning coffee on my porch, weather permitting, walks with Scout along the lakeshore, and evenings spent discussing books or playing chess by the fire. With Linda's guidance, I established the Rose Meredith Foundation for Women in Transition. The original shelter in Albany would be renovated and expanded with new satellite locations planned for Syracuse and Buffalo. We partnered with the Canadian mining company, Northland Resources, negotiating terms that would minimize environmental impact while generating substantial funding for the foundation. On a crisp December morning, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing architectural plans for the foundation's new headquarters when my phone chimed with a text from Christopher. Olivia had the baby last night. $7 a girl. We've named her Victoria Rose. I stared at the message, emotions washing over me in waves. A granddaughter. Rose. They had given her Rose's name. Before I could formulate a response, another message appeared. We'd like you to meet her. Can we come to the cabin this weekend? My fingers hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to refuse, to deny them access to my sanctuary, as they had denied me access to their home. But this wasn't about Christopher and Olivia anymore. This was about a newborn child, innocent of her parents' actions. I would love to meet Victoria. Saturday at noon would work well. I pressed send, then immediately called Howard. I need your help, I told him. My granddaughter is coming to visit. By Saturday morning, the cabin had been transformed. Howard and I had spent 2 days cleaning, arranging fresh flowers in vintage mason jars, and preparing a nursery corner in my bedroom with a beautiful hand-carved cradle he had found in his attic, one his own children had used decades ago. Are you nervous? Howard asked as we laid a fire in the hearth, Scout watching attentively from her favorites. Spot on the rug. Terrified, I admitted. What if she still has that smirk? What if Christopher is just using the baby to try to get the property? Howard's weathered hand covered mine. Then you'll handle it with the same grace you've shown all along. The crunch of tires on gravel announced their arrival precisely at noon. I smoothed down my sweater and opened the door before they could knock. Christopher stood on the porch, holding a car seat draped with a pink blanket. Behind him, Olivia lingered uncertainly, her figure still showing signs of recent pregnancy despite the expensive camel coat she wore. Come in, I said, stepping back. It's too cold to stand out here. They entered cautiously, as if expecting traps. Christopher's eyes widened slightly as he took in the cabin's transformation. The gleaming hardwood floors, the tasteful furniture, the modern kitchen appliances that had been installed the previous week. You've done some renovations, he said, setting the car seat down carefully. Just a few upgrades, I replied. May I? He nodded, and I knelt beside the car seat, pulling back the blanket to reveal my granddaughter. Victoria was perfect. Tiny features, set in a peaceful sleeping face, a wisp of dark hair peeking from beneath a knitted cap. My heart expanded painfully in my chest. She's beautiful, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. Would you like to hold her? Christopher asked. I nodded, unable to speak. He lifted her carefully from the car seat and placed her in my arms. The weight of her, so small yet so substantial, grounded me in a way nothing else could have. I cradled her against my chest, breathing in the indescribable scent of new life. When I looked up, I found Olivia watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not the contempt I'd expected, but something more complicated. Perhaps recognition, or even remorse. Please sit down, I said, gesturing toward the sofa. Can I offer you tea? Coffee? The awkwardness dissipated slightly as we settled into the living room. Howard had tactfully made himself scarce, taking Scout for a walk to give us privacy. "The cabin looks different," Olivia ventured, glancing around. "Quite comfortable, actually." "It always was," I replied mildly. "Just needed a woman's touch." Christopher cleared his throat. "Mother, I want to apologize for how things happened. The way you were asked to leave, it wasn't right. Asked, not forced, not evicted. Still softening the truth. But I let it pass, focusing on the warm bundle in my arms." "Why Rose?" I asked instead. "Her middle name." A flicker of discomfort crossed Christopher's face. Dad always spoke highly of his grandmother, and I found some old photographs in his study, the ones with her at the cabin. I supplied. He nodded. She seemed important to him. I thought it might be a way to, I don't know, honor his memory. There was an opening here, a moment where I could reveal everything. The lithium, Rose's legacy, Robert's foresight. But looking at Victoria's peaceful face, I realized that some truths could wait. "It's a beautiful name," I said simply. "I think your father would be pleased." We passed an hour in surprisingly comfortable conversation. Christopher shared news of his work, Olivia spoke about her plans for the nursery, and I offered what new grandmother wisdom I could muster. When Victoria began to fuss, I handed her to Olivia, who excused herself to nurse in the bedroom. Alone with my son for the first time in months, I felt the weight of unspoken words between us. "The foundation is doing well," I said, breaking the silence. "We're expanding the original shelter in Albany. Your monthly payments are making a real difference." Christopher winced. "About that, I've been meaning to talk to you. The payments are challenging for us right now. With Victoria and the new expenses." I raised an eyebrow. "You live in a $4 million penthouse, Christopher." "It's not about the money itself," he said quickly. "It's the principle. Those conditions in Dad's will, they feel like a punishment." "And what would you call what you did to me?" I asked quietly. He had the grace to look ashamed. "A mistake. One I'd like to make right." "How?" "Come back to Westchester," he said, leaning forward earnestly. "Not to live with us necessarily. We could find you a nice condo nearby, somewhere you could see Victoria regularly." The old Helen might have jumped at the offer, grateful to be included, eager to please. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "My home is here now," I said firmly. "You and Victoria are welcome anytime. But I won't leave." Before he could respond, the front door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and Howard's tall figure, Scout, bounding in. Ahead of him. "Sorry to interrupt," Howard said, quickly assessing the scene. "Just needed to grab Scout's leash." Christopher looked between us, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're not alone up here, are you?" I smiled. "No, I'm not. Howard has been a wonderful friend." Something shifted in my son's expression. Recognition, perhaps, that his mother had built a life without him. One that might even be better than the one she'd had before. As they prepared to leave, Victoria bundled back into her car seat. Olivia surprised me by taking my hands in hers. "The Rose name," she said quietly. "It means more to you than we realized, doesn't it?" I nodded, searching her face for signs of calculation but finding only curiosity. "She was a remarkable woman," I replied. "Someday I'd like to tell Victoria all about her namesake." "We'll bring her back," Olivia promised, and I thought I detected sincerity beneath her polished exterior. Maybe we could come for Christmas." It was a small olive branch, but one I was willing to accept. "I'd like that very much." After they drove away, Howard and Scout rejoined me on the porch. We stood in companionable silence, watching. The car disappeared down the winding road. "Well," he asked finally, "how did it go?" I considered the question carefully. "Better than expected. Worse than hoped." "And the baby?" At this, I smiled. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." Howard's hand found mine, warm and steady. Just like her grandmother. The first snow of December transformed Lake George into a wonderland. I woke early on a Sunday morning to find the world draped in white, the lake's edge beginning to freeze in delicate crystal patterns. Howard had promised to take me ice fishing once the lake froze solid, an experience I'd somehow missed during my previous visits to the cabin. I was pouring my morning coffee when a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into my driveway. My heart stuttered, thinking perhaps Christopher and Olivia had returned unexpectedly. But the man who emerged was a stranger, tall in an expensive suit despite the weather, his confident stride marking him as someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. A sharp knock on the door sent Scout into a frenzy of barking. I quieted her with a gentle hand and opened the door just enough to address the visitor. "Can I help you? Mrs. Whitaker?" The man smiled, extending a business card. "James Prescott, Executive VP of Acquisition for Meridian Resource Group. I was hoping I might have a few minutes of your time." I glanced at the card, embossed logo, Manhattan address, but didn't take it. "I'm not interested in selling, Mr. Prescott." His smile didn't waver. "I haven't made an offer yet, Mrs. Whitaker. And I haven't invited you in," I replied. Scout growling softly at my side. Something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at not being immediately welcomed. "I understand you inherited this property recently. My company has been interested in this particular area for some time. We're prepared to make an extremely generous offer, one that would allow you to live very comfortably anywhere you choose." "I'm already living very comfortably, thank you." He glanced past me, taking in what he could see of the cabin's interior. "With all due respect, Mrs. Whitaker, I think you'll find our offer considerably exceeds the market value of a rustic property like this one." "And why would Meridian be so generous?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Let's just say we see potential in the area." His practiced smile returned. "May I come in to discuss details? This weather is rather inhospitable for a porch conversation." "No, you may not." I kept my voice steady. "And I suggest you speak with my attorney, Linda Avery, regarding any future communication. Good day, Mr. Prescott." I closed the door before he could respond, heart pounding. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a long moment, snow gathering on his shoulders, before returning to his vehicle. As he drove away, I immediately called Linda. "Meridian Resource Group," she confirmed after I described the encounter. "One of the largest mineral extraction companies in North America. They've been trying to get a foothold in the Adirondacks for years." "How would they know about the lithium already?" "We haven't announced the partnership with Northland yet. The geological surveys aren't exactly secret, Helen. Anyone who knows what to look for would realize the potential. And Meridian doesn't exactly play nice." "Meaning?" "Meaning they've been known to use aggressive tactics to secure properties, everything from harassment to manipulating local zoning laws." Linda's voice hardened. "I'll send them a formal cease and desist letter, but stay vigilant. And maybe ask Howard to keep an extra eye out." I hung up feeling unsettled. The quiet sanctuary I'd been building suddenly seemed vulnerable, exposed to forces I hadn't anticipated. When Howard arrived that afternoon, bearing a Dutch apple pie and news from town, I told him about my visitor. "Meridian," he growled, his normally kind features darkening. "They tried the same approach with me 2 years ago. Wanted my waterfront access for what they called recreational development. When I refused, they somehow got the county to reassess my property taxes, nearly doubled them overnight." "Can they really do that?" "They have connections," Howard explained, cutting us each a slice of pie. "And very deep pockets. This lithium deposit is worth a fortune, Helen. Don't underestimate what people will do for that kind of money." The warning stayed with me as December progressed. Linda's cease and desist letter seemed to work. Meridian made no further direct contact, but I noticed unfamiliar vehicles driving slowly past the cabin, and once, a drone hovering over the property until Howard fired his shotgun into the air, sending it retreating across the lake. 2 weeks before Christmas, Christopher called with unexpected news. "Mother, I need to tell you something, and I'd rather you hear it from me." His voice was strained. "Olivia and I have been approached by Meridian Resource Group. They're interested in buying the cabin property." I sat down heavily on the sofa. "I'm aware of Meridian's interest, Christopher. They've already approached me directly." "Oh," he sounded surprised. "Well, their representatives seem to think we might have some influence over your decision. They're offering $10 million, Mother. $10 million. The number was meant to shock me, to tempt me. Just months ago, it might have. Now it seemed almost insulting. The property isn't for sale, Christopher. Not to Meridian, not to anyone. But, Mother, $10 million. You could buy a beautiful home anywhere, set up trust funds for Victoria, live in complete comfort for the rest of your life." "I'm already living in comfort," I replied. "And Victoria's future is secure without selling my home to corporate predators?" A beat of silence. "What do you mean her future is secure?" I hadn't planned to reveal the full extent of my circumstances yet, but perhaps it was time for a partial truth. "The cabin property is worth considerably more than Meridian is offering," I said carefully. "I've already declined offers nearly twice that amount." 20 million? Christopher's voice rose in disbelief. For that old cabin and a few acres of woodland, that's impossible. Nevertheless, it's true, and I'm not interested in selling, at any price. Is this about punishing us? He asked, his tone hardening. Keeping valuable assets away from your family out of spite? The accusation stung, but I kept my voice level. This isn't about you, Christopher. It's about honoring your father's wishes and protecting something precious. The cabin can't mean that much to you. You barely visited in the last decade. I'm not talking about the building, I said. I'm talking about principles, about legacy. An exasperated sigh came through the phone. Fine. Keep your principles, but don't be surprised if Meridian doesn't take no for an answer so easily. Their representative was quite persistent. A chill ran through me. What exactly did they say to you? Nothing specific. Just that they had ways of ensuring property. Owners saw reason eventually. I assumed it was standard negotiating tactics. But I knew better, and so did Howard and Linda. Over the next few days, we developed a strategy. Howard installed security cameras around the property. Linda prepared legal documents asserting my rights as a landowner and detailing Meridian's history of harassment in similar cases, ready to file if needed. I moved Robert's documents from the boathouse to a safety deposit box in Albany. 3 days before Christmas, I received another visitor. This time, the county tax assessor, a thin man with apologetic eyes who informed me that my property had been incorrectly valued and would need to be reassessed. Let me guess, I said, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. You'll find that my taxes should be significantly higher. He couldn't quite meet my gaze. The county is simply ensuring all properties are correctly valued according to current market conditions. And would these market conditions have anything to do with Meridian Resource Group? His startled expression confirmed my suspicions. I handed him Linda's business card. All communication regarding my property should go through my attorney, and you might want to consider whether helping Meridian harass elderly widows is really what you want to be known for, Mr. Henderson. That evening, as Howard and I sat by the fire discussing our next moves, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Whitaker? A woman's voice. Professional, but warm. This is Janet Chen from the New York Times. I understand you've been experiencing some harassment from Meridian Resource Group regarding your property at Lake George. We're working on an investigative piece about corporate predatory practices in resource-rich areas, and I was hoping I might speak with you. I looked at Howard, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, Ms. Chen, I replied, something like hope kindling in my chest. I believe I'd have quite a story to tell. You. The New York Times article appeared on January 15th, front page of the business section with the headline, Corporate Giants Target Widows Woodland, Meridian's Pattern of Harassment Exposed. Janet Chen had done a thorough job, not only documenting my situation, but connecting it to a dozen similar cases across the country where Meridian had employed intimidation tactics against landowners, sitting on valuable resources. The day after publication, Meridian's CEO issued a public statement denying any wrongdoing while simultaneously announcing the retirement of James Prescott. The county tax assessor mysteriously discovered that my property had been correctly valued after all, and my phone began ringing with calls from other news outlets, environmental groups, and even a documentary filmmaker interested in telling my story. You've become something of a folk hero, Howard remarked as we browsed through the morning's headlines over coffee. Scout dozed contentedly at our feet, occasionally twitching in her sleep. At 70, no less, I smiled, pouring him a second cup. Not exactly how I imagined spending my retirement years. Regrets? He asked, his eyes searching mine. Shook my head. Not a single one. Outside, January had transformed Lake George into a crystalline wonderland. The lake had frozen solid enough for ice fishing, and Howard had promised to teach me this weekend. But first, I had another appointment to keep. The Rose Meredith Center for Women in Transition was scheduled to break ground in Albany that afternoon. What had once been a struggling shelter was now expanding into a comprehensive support facility, offering not only emergency housing, but legal aid, job training, and educational opportunities for women rebuilding their lives after domestic violence, homelessness, or family rejection. Are you nervous about your speech? Howard asked as we drove toward Albany, the winter landscape speeding past our windows. Terrified, I admitted. Public speaking was always Robert's domain, not mine. You'll be magnificent, he assured me, briefly taking his eyes off the road to smile at me. Just speak from the heart. The groundbreaking ceremony had attracted more attention than I'd anticipated. A crowd of about 200 people gathered on the snowy lot where the new center would stand, staff from the existing shelter. local, politicians, supporters, and a surprising number of media outlets. A temporary stage had been erected, with chairs for dignitaries and a podium bearing the new Rose Meredith Foundation logo, a simple rose in bloom. Elaine Carter, the foundation's director, greeted me with a warm embrace. "Helen? We weren't sure you'd make it with all the snow." "Nothing could have kept me away," I assured her, introducing Howard. As Elaine made the opening remarks, I scanned the crowd and froze. Standing near the back, partially obscured by others but unmistakable, were Christopher and Olivia. My son held Victoria, now almost 2 months old, bundled against the cold in a pink snowsuit. Olivia caught my eye and gave a hesitant wave. Before I could process their unexpected presence, Elaine was calling me to the podium. With suddenly trembling hands, I withdrew the speech I'd prepared. But as I looked out at the faces before me, the shelter staff who had worked tirelessly with limited resources, the women whose lives would be transformed by this new beginning, and my son standing at the back with my granddaughter, the prepared words seemed inadequate. I set the paper aside. My late husband's grandmother, Rose Meredith, opened the first women's shelter in Albany in 1952, I began, my voice gaining strength with each word. She did so because she understood that safety, dignity, and opportunity should never be luxuries available only to those fortunate enough to be born into the right circumstances. The crowd quieted, listening intently. 6 months ago, I found myself suddenly displaced from my home with nothing but a set of keys to a cabin I hadn't visited in years. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, one that could have broken me. Instead, it became the beginning of a journey that led me right here, to this moment, with all of you. I made eye contact with several women in the front row wearing the shelter's volunteer badges. The truth is, we all face moments when the structures we've relied upon collapse around us. What matters is what we build from those ruins. This center will be more than just a building. It will be a foundation for new beginnings. A place where women discover, as I did, that their value doesn't depend on someone else's assessment. My eyes found Christopher in the crowd. His expression was complex. Pride mingled with something that might have been regret. The Rose Meredith Center will provide emergency housing for up to 70 women and children, legal advocacy services, educational opportunities, and perhaps most importantly, a community of support. Because sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property. It's the knowledge that you are not alone. The groundbreaking itself was symbolic. The frozen ground wouldn't permit actual construction until spring, but as I joined Elaine and the board members in turning over spadefuls of snow-covered earth, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was Robert's legacy, and Rose's, made real through my hands. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Christopher approached with Olivia and Victoria. "Mom," he said, the informality surprising me. "That was an incredible speech." "Thank you," I replied, automatically reaching for Victoria. Olivia transferred her into my arms without hesitation. "I didn't expect to see you here." "We saw the article in the Times," Olivia said, her usual polish subdued, "about Meridian and the lithium deposits. Why didn't you tell us?" The question was direct, but her tone lacked accusation. Would it have changed anything? I asked quietly. Christopher had the grace to look ashamed. "Yes, it would have." "I don't think so," I countered gently, adjusting Victoria's tiny hat. "You would have seen dollar signs instead of a family legacy. The value would have eclipsed the meaning." We stood in awkward silence, our breath forming clouds in the winter air. "The foundation is remarkable," Olivia finally said. I'd like to help if you'd let me. My firm could provide pro bono legal services for the women here." The offer took me by surprise. Not just the practical support, but the implicit acknowledgement of her role in my displacement. It wasn't quite an apology, but perhaps it was the beginning of one. "I think that would be wonderful," I said sincerely. Howard approached, having given us space for our family moment. "The caterers are setting up inside the temporary offices for the reception," he informed me. "Elaine is asking for you." I introduced him to Christopher and Olivia, watching carefully for their reaction. Christopher extended his hand immediately. Olivia's greeting was more reserved but polite. "Will you stay for the reception?" I asked them. Christopher glanced at Olivia, who nodded. "We'd like to, yes. And maybe we could come up to the cabin this weekend, if you're not busy." "Actually," I smiled, "Howard is teaching me to ice fish on Saturday, but you're welcome to join us on Sunday for dinner." As we walked together toward the reception, Victoria warm in my arms and Howard's steady presence beside me, I realized we were taking the first tentative steps toward a new kind of family, one built not on obligation or inheritance, but on choice and respect. It wasn't perfect. The wounds were still too fresh for that, but it was a beginning. Spring came late to Lake George. April brought the first real thaw, ice reluctantly releasing the lake into liquid again, snowdrops pushing through the softening earth around the cabin. I had spent the winter settling into a rhythm. Weekdays often in Albany overseeing the Rose Meredith Center's construction, weekends at the cabin with Howard, and increasingly often, visits from Christopher, Olivia, and Victoria. Our reconciliation had been gradual, built on small moments rather than grand gestures. Christopher had stopped asking about the lithium or suggesting I sell the property. Olivia had begun consulting me about the foundation's legal needs, her expertise in family law proving invaluable for women navigating custody battles. The baby, my beautiful granddaughter, had been the bridge we needed, her innocent presence making it impossible to maintain old grievances. On a particularly mild Saturday in early May, I sat on the dock watching Howard teach Christopher how to repair the old rowboat we'd found in the boathouse. Victoria, now 5 months old, lay on a blanket beside me, batting at a mobile of colorful wooden birds Howard had carved for her. Olivia was inside preparing lunch, having discovered an unexpected passion for cooking during her maternity leave. "They've changed," Howard remarked later as we took Scout for her evening walk, the spring twilight painting the mountains in Uaran watercolor purples. Both of them. Yes, I agreed. Though I'm not sure if they've changed or simply revealed parts of themselves that were buried under ambition and insecurity. "Either way," he said, his hand finding mine in the gathering dusk, "it's good to see you surrounded by family." Family. The word had expanded for me over these months. No longer just Christopher and his immediate circle, but Howard, Elaine, the women at the center, even Linda, whose fierce loyalty had evolved into genuine friendship. As we rounded the curve back toward the cabin, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, a sleek black sedan with government plates. "Are you expecting someone?" Howard asked, his posture immediately protective. "No." I quickened my pace, worry speeding my steps. We found a distinguished-looking woman in her 60s sitting on my porch, engaged in animated conversation with Christopher and Olivia. All three stood as we approached. "Mom," Christopher called, "this is Senator Catherine Harrington. She's here to speak with you about the foundation." The senator stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mrs. Whitaker, it's an honor to meet you. Your work with the Rose Meredith Foundation has caught a lot of attention in Albany and in Washington." Over coffee inside, Senator Harrington explained her visit. The federal government was launching an initiative to support programs addressing women's economic security and housing stability. The Rose Meredith model, combining immediate shelter with long-term support systems, had been identified as a potential template for national expansion. "We'd like to offer grant funding to establish 5 more centers across New York State," the senator explained, with the goal of eventually taking the model nationwide. I glanced at Howard, who nodded encouragement, his eyes shining with pride. "That's extraordinary," I managed. "There's more," Senator Harrington continued. "We'd like to establish the annual Rose Meredith Award for Innovation in Women's Empowerment, and we'd be honored if you would chair the selection committee." Later that night, after everyone had gone and the cabin was quiet except for Scout's gentle snoring, Howard and I sat on the porch swing, a blanket draped across our laps against the spring chill. "National expansion," he mused. "Rose would be proud. Robert, too, I think," I added softly, though I still wonder sometimes why he kept so many secrets. Why not tell me about the lithium while he was alive? Howard considered this. Maybe he knew you needed to discover your own strength, that if he simply handed you wealth and power, you wouldn't have found the resilience that brought you here. I leaned against his shoulder, watching the moonlight shimmer on the lake's surface. Or maybe he just liked dramatic gestures from beyond the grave. Howard chuckled, his arm tightening around me. There's that, too. A year had passed since that terrible day when Olivia had sneered, "Rot there, you stinking old woman," as I'd been expelled from their home. A year of discovery, growth, and unexpected joy. The words that had once cut so deeply now seemed almost laughable in their inaccuracy. I hadn't rotted. I had blossomed. Tomorrow would bring more meetings about the Foundation's expansion. Linda was negotiating additional leasing agreements with Northland Resources that would fund operations for decades. Christopher had begun using his business acumen to help create sustainable income streams for women leaving the shelter. Olivia was organizing a network of attorneys to provide free legal representation. Even Victoria had a role, her innocent presence at fundraising events melting the hearts of potential donors. "A penny for your thoughts," Howard murmured, his voice rumbling comfortably against my ear. "I was just thinking about inheritance," I replied, "about what we truly pass on to the next generation." Robert had left me this cabin knowing the land held value far beyond its monetary worth, but the real inheritance, the one I would someday leave for Victoria, and perhaps other grandchildren yet to come, wasn't the lithium beneath our feet or the foundation that bore Rose's name. It was the understanding that our worth isn't determined by others' assessment, that dignity can't be granted or taken away by someone else, and that sometimes the greatest gifts arrive disguised as rejection. "They thought they were casting me aside," I said softly, "but really, they were setting me free." Howard's hand found mine in the darkness, our fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment in life. "Freedom looks good on you, Helen Whitaker," he said, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. Above us, stars punctured the velvet sky in brilliant constellations. Below, the lake reflected their light, doubling the glory. And here, in this moment, I was exactly where I was meant to be, in a cabin that had become not a prison of exile, but the birthplace of my true self. They had expected me to rot. Instead, I had taken root and grown stronger than they ever imagined possible.